Hello, guys. This is Grandmaster Eugene Perelshteyn. Welcome to today's lesson. Please let me know if you can see and hear me okay. Hi, good. Sound is good. You guys can see and hear me? Perfect. All right, good to hear. All right. Yeah, so today we're actually going to talk about Benoni structures, but I have a little appetizer for everyone to warm up to this end game that was just literally played in India Team Championship, Gukesh against Anand. It's quite instructive. So we're going to start with this, and then we'll start with the lesson on the Benoni structures. Good, good. You can hear me. Perfect. All right. Can you guys see the screen okay? You can see the position. White to move? Yes. Perfect. All right. All right. So we'll give maybe another minute or so for the people to join us. Again, this is Grandmaster Eugene Perelshteyn, and we're going to be talking about Benoni structures today. But first, I want to show you this end game as a warm-up because we have two world champions. One is Gukesh, who is the current world champion, playing Anand, and they both are barely have any time left at this point in the game. And they both started making very, very instructive mistakes. So that tells you that even in the simplest end games, the top guys, under pressure especially, make mistakes. Okay, so let's start with this end game, and then we'll give maybe another minute or two for everyone to show up to go through the Benoni lecture. So here, white to play. Okay, and here Gukesh immediately makes a mistake. All right, he plays rook d5. First, let me walk you through the game. I'm not going to tell you every move where the mistake happened. I'm just going to walk you through the game. Rook d5 is played. Well, it's a natural reaction. You want to cut off the king. You want to cut off the king from coming toward the b pawn. But that's a mistake. We'll come back and talk why. Now, Vishy plays king e6, rook d8, rook h7. Okay, he wants to start checking the king. White plays king a4, and here come the checks, and he just kept checking him, and the game is just a dead draw. So lots of instructive mistakes that led to this position. So let me start from the beginning. Again, for those who are just joining us, this is Grandmaster Eugene Perelshteyn, and we're going to start with a warm-up, this very instructive endgame, Gukesh against Anand, and then we're going to be talking about Benoni structures. Yeah, the frontal defense. Good job, Jack, that you remember this defense. All right, so first of all, let's talk about this first position. White already made a very significant mistake, rook d5. Who can tell me the winning move for white that Gukesh missed? Let me know in the chat, please. Okay, let's give people some more time. Again, this is just a warm-up end game before the main course. This is an appetizer before we start the Benoni lecture. All right, let's give people some time. Oh, you guys are pretty good. I'm seeing a lot of you getting the answer correct. That's correct. Rook a4 is absolutely the best move. Again, both players are under pressure, yet they're both world champions. And clearly, under pressure, white misses this opportunity. Yeah, so you're kind of winning the tempo. Of course, the king and pawn endgame, you don't have to calculate, right? The king is going to escort the pawn and win. So rook h8. And now what's the winning idea, guys? Yes, one of the key elements that Gukesh actually knew, but he executed in the wrong at the wrong time. Cut off the king on the e file. The further the king is from this pawn, right, the easier it is to win. And now it's an easy win. We're going to use the king, the pawn, and the frontal defense is not going to help, right? Because we're going to hide behind our pawn. Then we're going to walk our king up, right? And then the rook is going to easily defend this pawn. The rook can even come back and defend it from the back. So for example, like I'm just going to show you the simplest possible rook b8 plan. King here, let's say check, king there, check here. The moment the rook comes there, you can defend. Then the pawn just walks up, easy win. And if the king comes up, you can just drop back to e1. Again, the rook can come to b1, and it's easy win. So yeah, the key is to cut off the king by rook e4. All right, so again, we're just starting from this endgame, then we're going to talk about the main lecture. So, okay, we know rook a4 wins, but there is more to this endgame, just this rook a4. After rook d5, the world champion Vishy Anand makes a very big mistake. He goes, he goes for king e6, which is the wrong move. The correct move is rook h8. We already talked about the frontal defense. You have to set up the defense. At the moment the king comes up, now is the time to kick the rook. Not the other way around. Anand messed up with the move order. And I'll explain to you why. You need the rook to be as far as possible from the king. In the game, the rook was only on the 7th rank, which is too close. So this is the key thing. The rook being that far, you can't really do anything. So yeah, king here. And the move, if you move the rook, the king gets closer. If you get the rook back, now the rook is far away from this king. It's an easy draw. So this is what Anand missed. Yet, after king e6, rook d8, rook h7, now Gukesh again, guys, makes a mistake. King a4, wrong. Yeah, this is wrong move. Why is this a wrong move? Because it allows the frontal defense with rook a7, rook b7. What should white do? What should white do? Hide behind the pawns. Well, I mean, if you hide behind the pawn, I'm gonna use my rook to do the frontal defense. Yeah, b4, okay. Better. Also, what else? Any other ideas? Right. So you can do this. And now you can't really, the rook is too close to the king. You're just gonna walk it up one of these squares. It's an easy win. Good job, yeah. So now he plays this move. Oopsies, he's gonna get checked. You can't escape the checks. Can't escape the checks. So how many moves did they make a mistake? So let's count. Oh yeah, they were under time pressure, right? Obviously, if they had more time, it's easy for them. But still, that's why you got to really learn these end games down cold. Probably they had, I don't know, seconds. I would know. I don't know exactly. So number one, rook a4 wins. Number one mistake. King e6 mistake. This is a draw. Rook h8. Rook d8. Okay, good move. Rook h7, and now king a4, another big mistake. Literally every move that we're making a mistake, the game goes from winning to drawing, winning to drawing. So instructive moment, at least for me, just to see how, two world champions are under pressure, right? That tells you that no matter how much you study chess, unless you manage, really manage your time and learn your end games, that's really the only way to play this out. A very tricky end game indeed. All right, so now I hope everyone got a little appetizer from this one. Let's move on. All right, let me go to the next one. All right, let me flip the board. All right, now we're going to talk about Benoni structures today. Does anybody play Benoni for white or black? What do you think about Benoni in general as an opening? No? Too risky. Okay. Let's see if anybody else. Well, as white, you are facing the Benoni sometimes. That's what I meant. Although there's like reversed Benoni. When I said white or black, you can start with knight of 3, right? Remember the reverse stuff, this and this, d4, g3, and then b4 is kind of reverse Benoni. That's what I mean. These structures are very important in chess. You face it sometimes. Okay, good. No. Kind of sophisticated. I play Nimzo because of my sword. Thank you so much. I face it sometimes. Okay. Anybody has like Nimzo plus Benoni repertoire? So what I mean is after d4, knight f6, c4, e6, it looks like we're playing the Nimzo Indian, right? This one we have the Nimzo. But against knight f3, we're going to be talking about this move c5. This is the Benoni option that I'm going to be mentioning. Anyone? Anyone plays the c5 or no? No. Okay, good. So sounds like it's kind of a new concept for a lot of people, the c5. So we're going to be talking about these structures where white plays d5. Now, sooner or later, these pawns get traded, right? This pawn goes here, knight comes there, they play e4, and that's a classic Benoni structure. Let me show you the moves. G6, e4. So this is what we're going to be talking about. The bishop usually goes here, fianchetto, d6, c5, right? White grabs the center with e4, develops the bishop, castles, and we have very asymmetrical structure here. All right, guys, yeah, don't spam, please. Okay, let's focus on the lecture. Okay, so now here comes some interesting questions for us. Why am I advocating for this move order? Because the classic Benoni, as you may know, starts with the move c5. So there has to be something different from the allowing sort of the Nimzo Indian and then playing e6. First question for everyone, what is the difference when the knight is on g1 versus f3 in the Benoni? Who can tell me what option, extra option does white have? G3, no, G3 you can play with the knight on f3 as well. That's not an extra option. Knight G2, yes, but knight G2 is not the most annoying line. Okay, yeah, some people are getting this correct. Whoa, knight H3. I don't know about knight H3. Yeah, F4 option is correct. You guys are, with those who said F4 Benoni, that's the most annoying Benoni. Let me show you what I mean. So after, let's say, knight C3, takes, D6 here, F4. This is a really, really annoying move for Benoni players. Why? Because after here, there is also this check. You have to play knight F because knight B allows E5. And these structures with knight F3 or A4 are quite annoying. Usually they do this and they play like A4 or castle. Basically, it's very, very dangerous for black. It's playable, of course, but it's very dangerous. It's like the engine will show like 0.8 type advantage, 0.7 maybe at best for black. So we're trying to avoid the F4 Benoni, and that's why we're using this weird move order, almost like we're telling our opponent we're playing the Nimzo Indian. Well, Nimzo Indian is a very solid opening. Black has lots of different setups, right? So very simple plan. Now, they play knight f3 because most players these days who don't want to allow the Nimzo, they start with this move order, knight f3. Now white is being flexible. White can still play g3. White can still do this. And only now do I recommend c5. Okay? Now I recommend c5. Why? What is the difference after c5, d5? Who can tell me? Simple, right? We stop the f4. With the pawn on f4, this e4, e5 ideas are not as dangerous without the pawn there. So white typically plays the same way with knight c3, this. And now one other nuance I want to mention. Black has to be extremely accurate with the move order right now. And who can tell me the absolute correct move here for us? Anyone? Absolute correct move order for black. Again, we're talking about the Benoni pawn structures, specifically with the move order knight f6, e6 to get white to commit to knight f3. Now, another important move that I will be recommending here. b5. I don't know if I would recommend b5. Bishop takes b5 check. Anyone? Bishop b4. Close. Not bishop g4. Okay, one person I think got this right. Anyone else? All right, it looks like people are getting the right idea. A6 exclam. The move order mattered. Now we have a serious threat, this or this. How does white deal with this? Anyone? If you're playing white, what's your typical response? Yes, a4, because we don't want to give black the classic Benoni expansion. But the moment you play a4, I go bishop g4. Haha, tricked you. Okay, if you say, wait a second, I'm going to stop your idea, of course. Then I play b5. That's the main idea. And then we just get a normal Benoni structure. So the point is white can't stop both of these ideas at the same time. Now, if you start with the move bishop g7, right? Now there's this bishop d3 line, and then they play this h3 stuff, and then you do this and they do this, and all of a sudden, you got to be very careful how you play this because they're going to castle and they're going to slowly grind you, and you're not going to have this typical idea. Yeah, you can still play this setup, but this is going to be really bad piece. Now, remember, Benoni is an opening where black gives up space. And when you have space advantage for white, you're naturally as black want to trade pieces. So this concept of getting this bishop and trading for the knight, not only do you prevent this e5 idea, you also get rid of this terrible piece, the bishop on c8, right? Because it's simply stuck. It's simply stuck there. So that is the dream Benoni. So I'm going to show you the dream Benoni, and I'm going to use a game by Magnus Carlsen, to show you how he got to play Benoni in the title Tuesday and destroyed white. Quick question, instead of playing e4 immediately, can white play something else? Good question, actually. I think white can play this knight d2 plan with or without e4. But again, that's, it's a more positional plan. You're not going to get a 4. So you can't really, I guess the other one is bishop f4, h3 plan. It's quite the logical plan too. But again, it's not the same as f4. They both are playable, this knight d2, e4, bishop f4, and still white can fight it for advantage. But, for a typical Benoni player, black should be ready for this. What if knight c3 before knight f3? Good question. We just talked about this. If white starts with knight c3, we play the Nimzo Indian. That's the beauty of this move order. We don't mind the Nimzo Indian, and against knight f3, we get this Benoni, the dream Benoni for black. All right, does that explain everything now? The move order? Yes, okay, good. Yeah, we started with an appetizer, the end game that you might have missed, but that's not important. This is important stuff, the Benoni. All right, so now let's get back to our main Benoni. c5, d5, ed, cd, d6, all pretty much standard moves. Now e4, why not grab in the center? This is the most standard move here. a6, a tricky move. We want to play b5 or bishop g4. Most players autopilot a4. They stop our idea. And now you understand the reason why we play bishop g4. The side which has less space naturally wants to trade off a pair of minor pieces. We're going to trade this bishop for the knight. You may say, oh, but you're going to give your opponent the bishop pair. That's correct. We don't mind giving them the bishop pair as long as we don't have any bad pieces, because the position remains closed, right? The center is somewhat locked up. We're going to play bishop takes f3, knight comes there, bishop comes there, we castle, and eventually we get our classic Benoni counterplay. Okay, so bishop e2 is autopilot for white typically. Notice, I would recommend you can immediately take on f3. You don't have to. You can start with knight bd7 probably. But again, some people don't want to allow this knight d2 concepts. So we're just going for this right away. Bishop takes, bishop g7, castles. Now, either option is fine. You can castle or knight bd7. In this game, Magnus played knight bd7 that we're about to take a look at. Okay, bishop f4. Now, this is the game between the, what's the speedy Vietnamese player, Minh Liam, forgot his name, on chess.com. Yeah, Minh Le, yeah, something like that. Not Le Quan Liam, yeah, not him, but Minh Le, yeah. He's like the blitz specialist, like blitz bullet specialist on chess.com. He's not as strong as a GM as Le Quan Liam, not to confuse the two, but he's extremely fast. Yeah, he plays Hikaru, Bullet Brawl. Wonderful Time, that's right. Thanks for reminding me. Wonderful. So this is Wonderful Time, one of the best blitz bullet players online against Magnus Carlsen playing black from a title Tuesday. Okay, so pawn on d6 is under attack. So Magnus simply defends it. Queen e7. Notice, yes, white does have the bishop pair, but without the classic f4, e5, it's really hard to open up the game. Oh yeah, tomorrow is title Tuesday. That's right. Anybody plays title Tuesday from my group here today? If you are if you're a national master, right? I think that's how it works. 2200. You're not titled. And you have school. Yeah, that's not easy if you have school. Unless you have some kids are off school for holidays. Maybe you can play them. All right, so let's focus, guys. Focus. All right, so now rook e1. Now, hold on. Is this a threat? Is this a threat? Not really, right? Not really. So we can just simply castle. And I call the main Tabia. Oh, sorry, Tabia is misspelled. Tabia is I think. Maybe it's okay. Maybe it's the right spelling. Tabia. Tabia of the Benoni. Yeah, Benoni is misspelled here. Sorry. So Magnus is playing black. And Wonderful Time is playing white. And Wonderful Time plays Queen b3. What is the thought process behind Queen b3? Well, he's thinking about, I know that you may want to play b5. I'm going to stop you. Not for long. So we'll come back to this in a second. I want to mention that a5 is an idea here as well. Okay. Now what to do for black, guys? Focus. Focus here. What to do for black after a5? What to do? Okay, not bad, Teddy. Simpler maybe move. b5 right away? Interesting. I don't think you have to do b5 right away. c4, 95, maybe. I think more natural would be this. Rook a b8. I want to keep the f rook maybe to go to e8 or, somewhere here. And then I'm going to play b5. You can't stop me from b5. Right? You just take a b, I play with the rook on b6. So this is the beauty of this position. I should go here. My next move is pretty much an autopilot b5, regardless of what you do. And then I'm going to get my counterplay. Yes, you're right. Sometimes knight e5 is an idea, sometimes c4. And this is a good position. a6 is weak, that's correct, but so is b2. This is also weak. And that's generally the plan in the Benoni. We're going to play a b5. They take. We're going to take with the rook. We're going to put pressure on b2. Yeah. So that's the plan. Yeah, don't worry about the a6 pawn, guys. b2 is just as weak. They're going to cancel each other out, but at least black has a very direct play with this pressure. All right, so let's get back to the game. All right, so Queen b3, Wonderful Time, understands the idea. b5 is coming. Magnus says, Okay, rook a8 anyways. I can play b5 at the right moment. The queen is actually going to be a little bit misplaced here. I think objectively already white is not better, to be honest. Okay, let's keep going. Yeah, it's the most wonderful time, yeah, of the season. So a5, white says, haha, I've got my queen here, I've got my pawn there, you're never going to play b5. Well, guess what? Magnus plays knight e8, which is not a bad move at all, but I actually like immediate b5. Why? As I mentioned earlier, don't worry about this a6 pawn. Take with the rook. You have a perfect counterplay. This guy's joining the party, right? We're going to have a lot of fun here against the b2 pawn. Yeah, Magnus decided, you know what, this knight could go e8, c7. That's actually another common idea in the Benoni. The knight comes here, here, and later, after b5, ab, rook takes, knight can go to b5 and d4. All right, so let's go. Keep going, guys. Bishop e2, retreat. Clearly, white's bishop was misplaced on f3. He's trying to improve it. Knight c7, Magnus says, I'm just following my plan. And that's another thing that you may enjoy in the Benoni structures. Honestly, these 16 moves that Magnus played, he played them on autopilot, meaning that he is hardly thinking. Benoni, you're just executing one concrete plan, and white can't stop it. Like this b5 idea just can't be stopped. Whereas e5 is nowhere to be, you just can't make it work. There's just too many defenders. So in some odd way, white is now playing defensive chess, whereas Magnus just keeps executing his plan. Oh yeah, that's right. The time control is now 5-0. So from an autopilot opening point of view, you are putting pressure on your opponent on the clock as well. Yeah, that's why Magnus likes the setup. Okay, so now bishop f1 is played. Good move probably, right? He doesn't see any clear idea to improve his pieces. He at least keeps the rook on e1, supporting the e-pawn. Here we go. b5, obvious move, right? Pawn takes, en passant. Yeah, you can flag people. That's right. All right, rook takes, hitting the queen. Remember I said queen is misplaced? Well, queen went to b3. Now queen has to retreat. Queen c2 is played. All right, so here we have an interesting setup. Two knights like this. This actually guy defends the pawn, by the way. We can double our rooks. Target that pawn. We can activate our knight in the right moment. So all I'm seeing is all these cool options for black. Honestly, I'm not seeing that many options for white. All right, let's keep going. Magnus just doubles. So now b2 is under attack. So rook b1. Quick question. What would you play as black now? So white goes full defensive mode. So focus, guys, focus. Knight e5, says Jack. I don't know about knight e5. Why would you play knight e5? Yeah, this makes more sense to me, knight b5 at least. Bishop e5, that's a strange looking move. Why you want to trade your beautiful bishop? Anybody else? Yeah, knight e5, bishop e5, I don't like those moves. Rook b4, yeah, that is actually a very promising move as well. Not bad. Bishop d4 is interesting, yeah. So I personally would be choosing between rook b4 and then knight b5, or knight b5 right away. So Magnus played rook b4, which is not a bad move, to be honest, but more accurate is a little bit this knight b5 first. So remember this idea. In the Benoni, this knight very often goes to here, here, and here. And then from here, it can even go to d4. Notice that if white trades, you get this very strong pawns now that can be mobile. So both options are good. Both options are good. You're saying rook a1? So what? I'm not really worried about this rook a1 move. Yeah, you definitely have the c4, knight c5 concept. Remember, rook a7, I can always just trade it off. So I don't really think there's anything I should be afraid of. Knight e5, I can always play. Yeah, with those two monster pawns, it's hard for you to justify the A file. Probably white is not losing anything like that, but just very unpleasant structure. Yeah, bishop d4 I like as well. Very nice idea to activate the queen to f6. So let's keep going. So Magnus decides to start rook b4. Not a bad move. h3. Again, prophylaxis, right? He understands that at some point he needs to safeguard his king. And h5. Magnus is not in a hurry. He could play knight b5 at any moment. He says, you create a little loft for the king, I'll create a little loft for the king. And he probably doesn't go too deep into calculation mode yet. Minus 0.4, you think? I'm not so sure if it's minus 0.4, but I do like black's position. b3. Okay, solid move. Here we go. Knight b5. Of course, Magnus knows about this idea. But now we have an interesting choice. Okay, wonderful time takes on b5. A takes b. Bishop d2. Uh-oh, a rook has barely any moves. Rook d4. Bishop c3. Is this a blunder by the world's top player? Did he get his exchange trapped? Uh-oh. What do you think? What would Levy say, right? The rook. All right, so let's see what you guys gonna say. Exchange is overrated. Okay. Okay, not bad, not bad. So I think you guys pretty much understand the concept here. Of course, who cares about the exchange? We can just play b4. It's called positional exchange sacrifice. Magnus is channeling his inner Petrosian, who was famous world champion for his exchange sacrifice. Rook takes, bishop takes. Now let's take a moment and look at this position closely. We've been taught that the rook is better than the bishop, right? Now check this out. You think this rook is better than the d4 bishop? The bishop controls this and puts pressure on the f2 pawn. Complete domination here. Right? So this is one of those great examples where, the classic material balance that you're taught is actually not quite true because this bishop is a monster. I don't know if it's better than two rooks. Okay, let's not get carried away. Um, White can always sacrifice the rook on d4, right? Like rook d1, rook takes d4. But still, I would say black has not only full compensation for the exchange, arguably black could even be better now, right? Because it's easier to be black here. We have a very strong initiative. Maybe we'll take over the file. Maybe we'll get our queen and our knight active. Maybe we'll push our pawns and just kind of play in the dark squares. All right, let's keep going. So we both kind of, Magnus knows he's better. Wonderful Time knows White's probably worse. All right, so everyone's on board that black is now better, but it's not, we're not winning yet. So we still have to be very careful. Rook d1, okay? Queen f6, maybe anticipating the rook sacrifice, maybe, but also the queen and the bishop start putting pressure on the f2 pawn. Bishop c4. This bishop is more like a pawn, to be honest. He's trying to just glue his position together. But black slowly plays around. Rook a8 is not bad, by the way. You can take over the file. And h4 is what Magnus does. I love h4. Why? Because now g3 is very difficult to achieve. And the dark square domination is, did I say beautifully the light squares? I meant to say dark squares. Oops. All right, let's keep going. Rook f1. Okay, well, what is the point of rook f1? Purely defensive. Maybe he wants to move the king. I'm guessing an f4. All right, Now, what's next, guys? How would you build up your pressure here? Black to play. Magnus does make one inaccuracy, by the way. Magnus does make one inaccuracy later. Let's see if you guys... The rook a8, okay, not bad. King h1, maybe. Anyone else? Rook e8. Okay, rook e8, bishop b5. I don't know about rook e8, bishop b5. Why are you allowing this? g5, knight e5, knight g6, knight f4. Beautiful. Beautiful dark square play there. Okay, that's one of the cool ideas that I like. Yeah, you guys are proposing some good ideas. Let's see what Magnus does. Uh-oh. Magnus makes a little inaccuracy here. What did he allow, guys? Okay, it's a blitz game. Let's not be overly critical of the world's #1 player. Okay, let's give people some time. All right, most players are probably seeing the main idea. Yes, of course, black missed this. I mean, white rather missed the opportunity to do this. Rook takes d4 is the correct move, and f4. And now the game is actually more complex. I said equal, but in reality, it's a very complex battle, right? White's pawn starts to get mobile. This d4 pawn, it's unclear if it's a strength or weakness. And yeah, I'm actually surprised white missed this opportunity, given how passive his position was. So Magnus definitely messed this up. He should have played g5. Just g5, solid move. Stop in f4. And I don't really see how white's going to free himself. For those who mentioned this idea is not bad. You can move the bishop out of the way. You can move the knight this way. Generally speaking, white is just completely stuck. This f4 idea is stopped forever. Yeah, total domination. All right, so here white misses his chance to get back in the game, sacrifice the exchange right back, and play for f4. Instead, he plays king h1. Queen f4. Queen f domination again by Magnus. White played queen d2. Queen d2. And now I love the next move that Magnus could have played. He actually played a very decent move, guys. He played the queen takes pawn. He says, oh, thanks for the free pawn. But I love this g5 concept. Even in the endgame, with a set of 2 double pawns, this domination is unstoppable. Black is slowly but surely going to win the game. White is just completely passive here. I simply don't see any moves. It's kind of unlike Magnus. Magnus typically doesn't miss this opportunity to take the endgame. I'm not really sure what he didn't like about g5. Maybe he just thought there's nothing wrong with taking a free pawn, which is also correct. But this is more like Magnus style. Complete domination. Rook a8, rook a2. All right, so yeah, you're right. White is not having a wonderful time in this endgame. All right, let's get back to the game. So this did not happen. This did not happen. All right, the game continued. Queen takes e4. Bishop d3. Okay, desperate is seeking counterplay, right? But Magnus says, I'm going to trade once, and I'm going to get the second pawn. So now, materially, actually black is doing quite well. Exchange and 2 pawns. And keep in mind, not just 2 pawns, but these guys against these 3 against this 1, we can get 2 connected passers, right? If black gets 2 connected passers, it slides out, right? We're just going to easily win. White is cooked. Yeah, more or less. This looks like GG. Yeah, close. But okay, so now white wants to get some kind of counterplay. So he plays f4. He said, all right, I've got to get, before you get these pawns rolling, I've got to get counterplay against this king. Really, that's only idea left. If you allow f5, it could get double-edged. So what to do? How does Magnus completely stop white's counterplay? All right, let's give people some time to think here. f5. Okay, f5 for black is interesting. Maybe not bad. It does open up your king a little bit, but you may be not worried about that. Queen f5. Okay, not bad. And rook e8. Rook e8, though. Rook e8 idea, rook e3. I see your idea. But then queen takes e3. So you actually have no threats. Rook e8, I don't like because of f5. Yeah, rook e8, I don't like at all. So here we go. Who is right? You guys who said queen f5 are correct. Why is it okay to have our pawns double in this endgame? This did not happen, by the way, but well, because actually it doesn't really matter as long as we have 3 against 1. Right. White can't really do anything on the king side. So the double pawns don't really matter. Yeah, easy win, right? We just create two connected pass pawns. Okay. So white desperately looking for counterplay. He plays queen e2. No threats. Magnus plays king g7. This is a typical move when you are just improving your position. You don't want to hang any pieces in time pressure. Just king g7, simple chess. Again, white has no counterplay. Queen e1. Okay. A little bit of one move threat that Magnus stops at queen here. Rook f3. Purely defensive move, right? Overprotecting this pawn. Maybe f5 is in the air. Rook a8. Finally, Magnus activates the rook. The rook wants to join the party. Here we go, f5. How would you meet f5, guys? How would you meet f5? All right, yeah, everyone's on the same page. Yeah, this is an easy one. The rooks need open files, so what do? We lock them with g5. Completely zero counterplay for the rooks. So these rooks are quite pathetic now. There's absolutely nowhere for them to go. The bishop still dominates all the dark squares. All right, you may say, but how am I going to win the game? White's got pretty solid defensive setup. So wonderful time plays queen e4. This is move 39. I don't remember how much time, but I'm pretty sure, both players have very little time at this point. Magnus definitely has more time here with black. So we have the rook under attack here. What do we do? Rook a2. All right, let's see if Magnus played your move. Not quite. He played rook a7. I'm not really sure why he chose a7, to be honest. Do I really see any problems rook a2? Let me think about this. Not that I can see at the moment. I don't know why he chose rook a7. My guess is he decided to activate his rook this way. Maybe he just didn't see a follow-up after rook here. That's my guess. So he just didn't maybe see a follow-up here, I'm guessing. Yeah, still very pleasant for black. But rook a7 is a clever idea. You're going to drive the queen out, and then you can start, activating the rook here or e3 square. Okay, so rook f1 is played. I mean, white just has to wait. This kind of waiting move. Okay, rook e7, right? Simple follow-up, easy move. Queen g4. Okay, here we go. Rook e3. Very annoying rook, right? There's this idea. The pawn is under attack. So wonderful time plays rook f3. And Magnus says, wait a second. I don't really want to trade. I'm going to play rook e5. Now, could he have traded on f3? Yes, he could have, but he decided, you know what? My rook is very active. This rook is very passive. I'm not in a hurry to trade. Magnus is actually interested to start pushing his pawns. So rook f1, d5, rook f3, rook e4, easy. Queen h5, zero threats, right, guys? c4. At this point, the game is already more or less decided. There's absolutely zero threats. Our king is quite safe. This queen is sort of in no man's land, doesn't really have any threats. Rook e7, yeah. There's really not a whole lot. All right, so let's keep going. Pawn takes. Okay, I mean, you don't really have a good move, so he might as well take. Rook f1. Okay, now everything wins here. Just start pushing your pawns, which Magnus does with b3. All right, yeah, let's focus on this position. Let's not go back. Rook e1. Again, one of those moves that doesn't really do anything. Magnus just trades. Okay, why not take a third pawn for fun? Queen a2. In this one, everything wins. Queen d3 is just the simplest move to victory. Bishop f6. Classic Magnus move. Just solidifying everything. Notice not a single piece could be attacked. And that's kind of the classic blitz um, life hack. If you play a lot of blitz, you want to put your pieces that they just protect everybody else. And now it's an easy win. All right, let's see. Let's keep going. Queen c8, no threats. Right, rook e8 is not the real threat. All right, finally, Le Tun Ming resigned here. He's 2598 rated, so 2600 GM. Magnus made it look too easy. All right, let's review it one more time. Let's go way to the very beginning. So again, move order. So why do we use this move order? We'll use this move order because we want white to force knight on f3, so they can never play this f4 idea in the mainline Benoni. So with the pawn on e4 and d5, this f4, e5 is annoying. So we allow, the drawback is we allow the Nimzo Indian, but many people don't mind the Nimzo Indian with black. More top GMs prefer this move order with d5. And then they get some kind of a QGD structure. But the more fighting move you can argue is c5, d5, and this is the asymmetrical Benoni formation that we've been talking about. And this is it. This is the main point. Got this dream setup. Now I want to quickly show you another game by another specialist in this opening. Indich, very strong grandmaster. All right, let's take a look at this one. So pretty much the same idea as you just saw. The move order is a little different. He started with d6. It really is just pure transposition. Don't worry about it, guys. Here we go, a6. Who can, again, remind me why a6 first? Very important little nuance. If you've been paying attention. Anyone in the chat? Stopping bishop b5, but there is much more to that. d4, knight f6, bishop f4, e6, e6. Yeah, you can play c5 there, yeah, against bishop f4. It's kind of like a London system, Raphael. It's a double threat, that's right. The threat is both this, before they get a chance to do this, and this. So most players play a4, then bishop g4, and then we take. Why do they take? You don't have to take, as I mentioned, but you kind of maybe not want to allow the knight d2 idea. It just gives white an extra option. This. Pretty much we're following move by move exactly rather, like the Magnus game, rook e1. Here, a5 is played. Now, normally black can play for this b5 push, but after rook b8, bishop e2, black says, I'm going to play rook e8. I'm not going to hurry with b5 because maybe I don't want to lose my a6 pawn and get the b pawn. This is kind of an interesting plan for black. You're going to see shortly. Bishop f1. I mean, white's playing all the typical moves. h5. We've seen h5 in the Magnus game, but much later after black got the b5 idea. So it's actually an interesting idea. Black is playing on both sides of the board in this one. He's not narrow-minded on this b5 plan. Interesting. Okay, let's see if this idea works. White plays queen d2, natural move connecting the rooks. Knight h7. Has anyone seen, maybe King's Indian players or some Benoni players, have you ever seen this knight h7 move, guys, with h5? Yes. Okay, anyone else? What is the idea if you play this h5, knight h7? Okay, some people have seen it. That's right, yeah. So one idea is this g5. Obviously, bishop's going to get trapped. So it's kind of an interesting expansion. So guess what? In the Benoni structures, black has more than one plan, not just the b5 plan that everyone knows. This expansion is quite interesting. White plays natural move h3. Here we go. He actually chose e3 square instead of h2. I don't know which is more accurate. The bishop is looking at the d pawn, but at the same time, the knight can get to e5 and we can play h4. Maybe bishop e3 gives him more options. g4. Very aggressive play by black. Okay, let's keep going. Now he plays bishop f4 and knight e5. I'm not sure, to be honest, if knight e5 is the best. Maybe he should have taken here first. But okay, it's an interesting move, knight e5. Pawn took, and now the moment of truth. Does white know how to play this position? He messed up. Knight d1 is a terrible move. Although it's understandable. He wants to get the knight to f5. There's only one correct move here for white. It's knight e2. The only way to get to f5 is via g3, which is not obvious, because after knight here, you have to give up your dark square bishop. But trust me, getting the knight to f5 is more important than the f4 bishop. So white missed this opportunity. This is still a big fight, by the way. Black did not fully equalize yet. But in the game, after this, black is better. One move changes everything. Let's see why. Knight g6. Well, you can already sense, uh-oh, he messed up. Knight e3, e4 pawn hangs. So he moves the bishop, but black is happily playing bishop d4 now. g3. Well, that weakens the square quite badly, although he was probably worried about this and some ideas like this. And then knight e5. Look at this domination. Black started the classic Benoni, and then he ends up with this dominating idea against the king. Really cool concept. I'm not sure if you've seen this before, how all of these squares work together. Okay, so knight f3 has to be stopped. Bishop g2. Still, the game continues. He played queen f6, which is a very straightforward move. I think b5 is more accurate. Now that the bishop has left this diagonal, the rook joins the party at the perfect moment. This guy is completely paralyzed. Now, this I would call classic Benoni domination. You're winning on both sides of the board. Yeah, I think white is just kind of semi-busted now. Maybe next we're going to play double and just sack on b2. Yeah, that's right. So, but okay, he didn't do this. He did this. Bishop f4. He's kind of doing like classic attack. He wants this, maybe this. Okay, knight e3, this. Because he doesn't want to allow the knight to get to f5. This and this. So very close. White is very close to getting mated here. And he goes wrong very soon here. Very soon he goes. Rook a d1. One of those generic moves that overprotects this pawn. That loses the game on the spot. Who can tell me how black wins the game? It's very easy. Simple chess here now. Okay, let's give people some chance to work through it. Yeah, I think most players are. Yep, it's very easy. Resigns. Well, it's actually funny why he resigned, because we have this very simple threat that you cannot stop. And these two rooks are not helping the king. Poor king is basically in the maidennet. Could white have defended better? Yes. They could have defended better. They could have played queen c3. There's a little bit of trap that black shouldn't fall for. Maybe b5 is best. Maybe knight fd7 is best. But if you go for knight f3, this is wrong. Who can tell me why knight f3 doesn't work here? What's the problem? Wait. Queen h6. Yeah, exactly. Good. Not, yeah, queen g5 first, not queen h6. Yeah, you guys are correct. So it's important to throw in this check. Not immediate, because then you get mated. Yeah, this check. And oopsies. If the king gets here, then we can force the trade with queen f5. King goes there, queen h4. I mean, there's no other square left. So basically, white stopped this idea. So black, again, as I mentioned, should just simply go for the classic Benoni or knight f to d7. Still domination. Instead, he played maybe in time pressure, who knows? And after this, resigned. So in this game, we learned yet another plan with h5, knight h7, kingside expansion. So you see, the Benoni structures, very specific structures, work really well if you know how to play them accurately. I'm going to show you one other example. So let me go over to the very beginning. So let's say you're not a Benoni player at all. You're not. You're playing this, and against Nimzo, you're happy. Against this, I don't know, you have, maybe you play my recommendation, bishop b4 check. This is the Bogo Indian. Maybe you play the d5. Maybe you play the Queen's Indian with b6. You don't have to play the Benoni. But here comes an interesting point. A lot of club players get really confused after this move a3. Has anyone faced this move a3, by the way? Or try to play it themselves? A lot of players get really confused. Who can tell me the idea of this a3 move? Yeah, maybe. But of course, the main idea is just to stop this bishop before. You're going to go here and then here. And then if you're not, I mean, this is the best move probably objectively, but if you're not a classic player, like you never want to play d5, let's say you are a bishop b4 check type of player or b6 type of player, it's very hard for you to face this move a3 because you're not familiar with this d5 structures. Well, for those who have been paying attention, there's one setup that works like a charm against a3. Who can tell me which setup? That's right, the Benoni. And well, I don't know about a5, but this works like a charm. Most players play here. I mean, e3 or dc, not very serious moves, right? This is the most space grabbing move. And then who can tell me why? Because the knight is still on g1, not on f3. Who can tell me why this is a good version of the Benoni for black? Why is this a good version of the Benoni? Let's give people some time to think. Something about the tempi, the tempo, one tempo. Well, you can play b5, but it's a banco. It's not a Benoni. We're talking about Benoni. That's right. Remember we talked about that after this, at some point, white has to play 4 to stop b5. Well, this is a tempo loss. If you can spot this type of thing instantly, like say you're just playing and then you say, oh, you tell yourself, oh, I have a tempo up Benoni. Bam. It works like a charm. Because then they can never play. Well, if they play a4, you win a tempo. And pawn on a3 is useless. And that is the thought process. If we were to do a little reverse play here, that's why a lot of players, when they see this, right? This is kind of like a reverse Benoni, if you think about this. Right? Although black has more options here, black can put knight on c6. So typically they start with knight f6, right? Then you do this. Then they do this, or something like that. Here, 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 and here. This is one way to get the reverse Benoni. You have a lot of different move orders. You can also start with c4 right away. And then you can do this. Some people even play b3, but you can do this. And again, d4. So this is a very topical position. A lot of GMs play this for white because, again, their thought process, I'm white, I'm a tempo up, so I can get my classic Benoni setup. very double-edged positions. But we're kind of focusing on the black side. So let me go back. So now you start thinking outside the box. Think about, for those of you who played the King's Indian. I've seen people do this against King's Indian. Knight f3, so g6, knight f3, bishop g7, e3. It's kind of like a tricky anti-King's Indian line. Well, guess what? After c5, d5, aren't we up a tempo? The pawn is on e3 instead of e4. The bishop is on c1, not coming out to f4. This is also kind of a Benoni, if you think about this. We're going to play this, this, this. Yeah, it's kind of annoying, like for King's Indian Grunfeld players, because you got to play d6 and deal with this like reverse King's Indian attack. But after this, white, if you don't play d5, let's say white plays bishop e2, I mean, black can immediately equalize if you want. With or without castles, you can just take in d5. Easy equality, right? So they kind of have to take their space, and then you can immediately play e6. And this is just yet another Benoni structure. So the more you start thinking about Benoni structures in chess, the more you realize that there are a lot of nuances, like with this weird e3 or a3 moves, or even here, I'll show you yet another one. A lot of players play g3, and some say, aha, I like my Benoni when the bishop's on g2 looking at his own pawn. So c5, d5, yet another Benoni structure. Usually something like this happens, right? They castle, castle. And now this bishop is looking at their own pawn. This is not the dangerous Benoni that black is afraid of. Yet again, a big theoretical discussion. Black is quite happy here usually, right? Still lots of theory, but nevertheless, it's a setup. So I want you to start thinking about this, not just pure Benoni, what I showed you, but in general, when you see different moves and different move orders, when is a good Benoni setup, when it's not such a good Benoni setup, and sometimes even with the reverse colors. All right, guys, I hope you had fun. Happy holidays, and enjoy enjoy the New Year's, okay? Yeah, bye everyone.